You can adjust the opacity, and you also happen to have some different checker patterns. Simple checker is the default. You can change to complex checker or custom texture. Here you can locate an image map to utilize if you prefer. Alright, so I'll go back to simple checker, and we will go through the different unfolding algorithms. So I'll click on ABF++, and you can see how that changes. It is still a good unfolding algorithm, but you'll find in many cases the global uniform is much better. Also, you'll notice how bright the highlight is on this UV island. If I click to global uniform, it's mostly gray. We can relax it a bit more if we like. Once more, ABF. And LSEM. Let's now look at planar. And we'll go back to global uniform. And relax. Now, if we want to modify it further, we can switch to a different mode. Let's go to brush mode. And I'm going to right click and drag inside the island to increase my brush, or I can use the bracket keys just like you would in Photoshop to increase your brush size. And with this shell selected, I can use the brush tool just like I would with the brush here in the top of Workspace. When I'm working on a mesh, I can tweak or modify the shape in this fashion. And I can see it change accordingly here. I can also hold down the Shift key as I right click and drag up. I'm increasing the smoothing level so I can smooth or relax inside the shell. Let's look at tweak. As the name implies, it's going to allow you to select individual components to tweak them. If I click over the center of a polygon, it's going to move just that polygon. Same thing, it's going to highlight that edge if I hover over it, click and drag. I'm going to hover over a point, you zoom in. Alternatively, you can switch to individual modes. For example, for vertices, I can select that point, move it. Faces, control click. Yeah, I can select that and just manipulate it individually. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and select a group of faces, and I can manipulate these separately. I'll control click. Now we want to fix these overlapping verts here. So let's go back to vertices. Control click to deselect those. Select this one. Control click. Let's go to brush. I'm reducing my brush size. So I'll do the same thing over here. Alright, so now let's go back to islands mode. I'll click and select this. Under the selected section of the tool panel, I'll click relax. Now I want to also point out one other thing while I'm here, and that is when you go to brush mode, when you have an island selected like this, if I were to try and modify another shell, it's not going to work. It's only going to work on whatever's selected. So I can go back to islands, control click, go to brush. Now it will work on either shell. So when you select an island or a shell, then that tells 3D Coat to isolate just that individual shell and not allow the other islands to be modified. Okay. Alright, skipping forward just a few moments, I did some further work on the Retapo mesh in terms of applying subdivision, and I set up the baking cages, the inner and outer depth, and also would advise anytime you have very tight areas of your model where there is a little bit of overlap, then you may want to add some zones. What I mean by that is you can click and apply spheres that will allow you to apply some custom changes or variations to the default values that you set here for your inner baking cage depth and your outer baking cage depth. So you can change them again accordingly. And when you click pick, you can also rescale and resize. But anyway, I went ahead and set that up and then just went through the baking process. 3D Coat copies this mesh and sends that copy over to the paint workspace where you now have a new paint object. So I'll go over here and I'll unhide what it created, and I can see in the texture editor my UVs. And now if I go to the UV workspace, I can see this paint object mesh with UVs applied, and I have the same options here in the drop list menu for the different UV sets. I can select them, and I can select UV shells and then choose move to the different UV sets. The main difference between this environment and the mirrored set of UV tools in the Retapo workspace is that here 3D Coat assumes you already have UVs and it's asking you, do you want to apply UV set? Because 3D Coat wants to make sure that you indeed want to apply these changes. So when you click on that, it will go ahead and apply those. I'm going to click cancel. And I want to show that 3D Coat in general will allow you to move your UV islands, and it will move the pixels that were previously associated or mapped to that shell. So let me scale that down. Once we make our changes, if we go to the paint workspace, we can see they were not applied yet. I'll click cancel. Before I do that though, I want to show another feature, and that is packing UVs. When you want 3D Coat to try and automatically place them, scale them, rotate them, you click pack UVs. Another option is pack UV2. If you hover over the tool, you'll see a tooltip that explains it's a bit different in that it won't rotate your shells. It will just move and scale them, but it won't rotate them. So many times you may have rotated your shell to be completely horizontal or completely vertical, and you don't want 3D Coat messing with that. You just want it to maybe reorder it or place it differently in your UV space, but you don't necessarily want it to change the orientation. Let's say, for example, I place this one somewhat horizontal. And now if I click pack UV2, you'll see it keeps that orientation. Even though it scaled it and it moved it somewhat, it did not rotate it. So I'm going to scale that up. This step is not necessary when you are in the Retopo workspace and you go to baking, because 3D Code assumes you're creating a new UV set and you're not overriding something. Much of the delay here, again, 3D Code is trying to intelligently reorder all the pixels that were assigned to that UV shell. All right, so now that we're done, let's go back to the Paint workspace. And voila, how amazing is that? So with that, we have concluded our overview of the UV tools inside of 3D Code, both in the Retopo workspace and the UV workspace. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.